My name is Marlene, and at 32, I never expected my expertise in cybersecurity would lead to corporate warfare. For 3 years, I had excelled working remotely, protecting our clients from invisible threats. Then Richard Walker became director. The day he called me a couch sitter in front of everyone, something broke inside me. I never intended to destroy his career, but when he revoked my remote access, he unknowingly started a countdown to his own downfall. If you want to know how a simple security specialist took down an arrogant director with a $117,000 penalty, stick around. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever been underestimated at work. I have been working at TechShield Solutions for 5 years now. We are not the biggest name in the cybersecurity industry, but we have built a solid reputation protecting sensitive data for several Fortune 500 companies and government contractors. These clients trust us with their digital crown jewels, and one security breach could potentially cost them millions of dollars. Not to mention the devastating blow to their reputation. My official title is Senior Systems Security Specialist, which basically means I manage and protect our security systems, detect vulnerabilities before hackers can exploit them, and prevent network attacks in real time. Think of it as being a digital guard dog constantly patrolling the perimeter for threats that most people would never even notice. 3 years ago, when the pandemic hit, like many companies, TechShield implemented a remote work policy. While some departments struggled with the transition, our security team thrived. My performance reviews during this period were consistently excellent. My response time to potential threats improved by 30%, and I caught 17 critical vulnerabilities that could have led to major breaches. The data spoke for itself. I was more productive working from my home office than I had ever been in our corporate headquarters. Our security team was small but mighty, just 3 of us handling everything. There was me, my colleague Lisa, who specialized in penetration testing, and Marcus, who focused on compliance and documentation. We had developed an efficient system that allowed us to monitor our clients 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with minimal burnout. We rotated on-call duties, had clear escalation protocols, and most importantly, we trusted each other completely. Our previous director, Janet Thompson, was a visionary leader who understood modern work dynamics. She always said, "I do not care where you work, as long as the work gets done." She judged us solely on our results, not by how many hours we spent at our desks or how early we arrived at the office. Under her leadership, our team had the lowest turnover rate in the company and consistently exceeded our performance targets. Everything changed when TechShield started expanding rapidly last year. We acquired 2 smaller security firms and suddenly found ourselves managing systems for 30 additional high-profile clients. The board decided to reorganize the leadership structure, promoting Janet to Vice President of Operations, overseeing multiple departments. That is when Richard Walker entered the picture. He was hired from a competitor to replace Janet as our director. Richard had an impressive resume with experience at several top tech companies, but from day one it was clear he had a fundamentally different management philosophy. Richard was old school in the worst possible way. He believed that real work happened only when people were physically present in the office where he could see them. During his introduction meeting, he made comments like, "I am looking forward to building a strong office culture again," and "there is no substitute for face-to-face collaboration." These might sound like harmless corporate platitudes, but to those of us who had been successfully working remotely, they were red flags. The changes started small. First, Richard mandated daily in-person team meetings at 9 a.m. sharp. For me, this meant commuting 45 minutes each way just for a 15-minute status update that could have easily been handled via video call. Then came the constant check-ins throughout the day where Richard would call or message asking for updates on projects, disrupting my workflow and concentration. He also implemented a strict time tracking system that required us to document every task down to 15-minute increments. The message was clear: Richard did not trust us to manage our own time effectively. It felt like we had gone from being respected professionals to kindergartners who needed constant supervision. Despite these challenges, I tried to remain positive. I told myself that Richard just needed time to see how effective our remote work setup was. I meticulously documented all my accomplishments, resolved issues faster than ever, and made sure to communicate every win. But as weeks turned into months, it became increasingly clear that evidence and results were not going to change Richard's mind about remote work. His bias ran too deep. The first real confrontation happened during a departmental planning meeting about 6 weeks after Richard joined. He had gathered the entire tech division in our largest conference room to discuss quarterly goals. I had dialed in remotely as I was monitoring a potential security issue that day. When it came time for our team to present, I began sharing my screen to walk everyone through the security enhancements we had implemented. Richard immediately cut me off. "Marlene, I cannot see your body language through the screen. How can we properly evaluate your ideas?" he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "The data speaks for itself," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "We have reduced vulnerability detection time by 23% this quarter." Richard responded by quickly moving on to Marcus, who was physically present, asking him to take over the presentation. The problem was that Marcus did not have access to the slides I had prepared or the specific metrics I was planning to discuss. The resulting presentation was disjointed and failed to highlight our team's achievements properly. After that meeting, Richard began systematically undermining my contributions. In group emails, my suggestions would go unacknowledged until someone else repeated them. During video meetings, Richard would often forget to call on me, even when the discussion directly related to my area of expertise. Then came the last-minute assignments. Richard developed a habit of sending me critical tasks at 4:30 p.m. on Friday afternoons, expecting them to be completed by Monday morning. These were not quick fixes either, but complex security analyses that would normally require days of focused work. One weekend, I canceled a long-planned visit with my parents to complete an urgent security audit that Richard had assigned late Friday. I worked nearly 40 straight hours to deliver it by his deadline, only to discover 2 weeks later that he had not even reviewed it yet. When I checked our internal tracking system, I found that Richard had marked my work as delayed and incomplete in his monthly department report, despite me delivering it exactly when requested. During a team lunch that I joined virtually, Lisa privately messaged me, saying that Richard had been making comments about remote workers taking advantage of the system and hiding behind their screens. Marcus later confirmed this, adding that Richard had specifically mentioned me in some of these conversations. Concerned about the situation, I scheduled a meeting with Janet, hoping that as my former boss and now a vice president, she might be able to provide some guidance or intervention. Janet listened sympathetically, but her advice was disappointing. "Marlene, I understand your frustration, but Richard has been brought in to lead the department his way," she said. "The board is very traditional, and they like his emphasis on office presence. Try to adapt to his style for now, and give him a chance to see your value." Taking Janet's advice to heart, I made a concerted effort to come into the office twice a week despite the long commute and the fact that I was actually less productive there due to constant interruptions. I made sure to engage with Richard face-to-face, brought him detailed reports of issues I had resolved remotely, and even organized a team lunch to build rapport. None of it made any difference. During a performance review, Richard acknowledged my technical skills, but gave me low marks on team integration and company culture fit. When I asked for specific examples of how I could improve in these areas, his answer was simple: "Be present more often." "But I have been coming in twice a week," I pointed out. "Your colleagues are here 5 days a week," he replied. "They are fully committed to our mission. Why should you be treated differently?" I tried explaining that our roles were different. Marcus handled documentation and compliance, which benefited from in-person meetings with various departments. Lisa conducted physical penetration tests of our facilities as part of her job. My role, however, involved monitoring digital systems that could be accessed from anywhere with a secure connection. Richard dismissed my explanation with a wave of his hand. "Everyone thinks their situation is special, Marlene. But the most successful teams work together in person every day." As I left his office that day, I felt a growing knot of dread in my stomach. It was becoming clear that no matter how exemplary my work was, Richard had already decided that remote work was equivalent to not working at all. And he seemed determined to phase it out completely, regardless of the impact on our effectiveness. The situation reached a breaking point 3 months after Richard took over. One Tuesday morning, I received an alert about unusual activity in one of our largest clients' networks, Meridian Global Banking. Their system showed signs of a sophisticated intrusion attempt that was bypassing their standard security protocols. Working from my home office, I immediately initiated our emergency response protocol, isolating the affected segments of their network while simultaneously tracking the intrusion attempt. Within 45 minutes, I had identified the vulnerability being exploited, patched it, and provided Meridian with a detailed incident report. The potential breach was stopped before any data was compromised. The client was impressed with our rapid response and sent a glowing email to our executive team. Rather than acknowledging this win, Richard used it as another opportunity to push his agenda during our next team meeting. While I am pleased that Marlene was able to address the Meridian situation, imagine how much faster we could have responded if she had been in the office, he said, looking around the conference room where I was joining via video call. Real-time collaboration with the team could have potentially resolved this even quicker. The statement was absurd on its face. Had I been commuting to the office when the alert came in, the response would have been delayed by at least an hour. Moreover, I had been in constant communication with both Lisa and Marcus throughout the incident via our secure chat system. With all due respect, Richard, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, the response time was 17 minutes faster than our service level agreement requires. The client specifically praised our rapid reaction. Richard's face hardened. That is not the point, Marlene. Team cohesion and presence matter. End of discussion. Later that week, an even more serious incident occurred. At 2 a.m. on Saturday, multiple clients experienced simultaneous security alerts. I was on call that weekend and jumped into action from my home office. What we discovered was alarming: a coordinated attempt to exploit a newly discovered vulnerability in a widely used software platform that many of our clients relied on. I worked through the night and most of Sunday coordinating with our software vendors, deploying emergency patches and monitoring systems to ensure the patches were effective. By Sunday evening, all client systems were secured, and we had implemented additional monitoring protocols to watch for similar attack patterns. On Monday morning, exhausted but satisfied with the successful resolution, I dialed into the weekly leadership meeting, expecting at least some recognition for averting what could have been a catastrophic breach, affecting multiple, high-profile clients. Instead, Richard barely mentioned the incident, referring to it only as a weekend maintenance issue that was addressed. When Janet asked for more details, Richard quickly pivoted to discussing his new initiative for improving office attendance and team visibility. That same afternoon, I received a calendar invitation for a meeting with the executive team scheduled for Wednesday. The subject line read, Operational Efficiency and In-Office Presence Requirements. My stomach dropped as I read the attached agenda, which included items like standardizing work location policies and phasing out exceptional remote work arrangements. The Wednesday meeting was worse than I had anticipated. Richard had prepared an elaborate presentation about the costs and risks of remote work, filled with cherry-picked statistics and misleading correlations. He proposed a new company-wide policy that would eliminate remote work entirely, requiring all employees to be physically present in the office 5 days a week. When the floor opened for questions, I raised my hand and was reluctantly acknowledged by Richard. The data actually shows that our remote security team has consistently outperformed industry benchmarks, I said, sharing specific metrics from our quarterly reports. Response times, threat detection rates, and client satisfaction scores are all higher under our current flexible arrangement. Richard's face reddened slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. Numbers on a spreadsheet do not tell the whole story, Marlene. What about the intangible benefits of in-person collaboration? The spontaneous ideas that happen by the coffee machine, the team building and company culture. Our results speak for themselves, I countered. And we have built strong virtual collaboration tools that actually eliminate the distractions of an office environment. That is when Richard crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Looking directly at me on the video screen, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, Marlene, some of us come to work every day while others prefer couch sitting. I know which type of employee I value more. A stunned silence fell over the conference room. Janet looked visibly uncomfortable, while several other executives shifted awkwardly in their seats. I felt a hot flush of humiliation wash over me, followed quickly by anger. That is an incredibly unprofessional characterization, I responded, fighting to keep my voice from shaking. I have consistently exceeded all performance metrics, responded to emergencies at all hours, and maintained an exemplary record. My location has never impacted my contribution to this company. Richard smirked slightly. Yet you cannot seem to make it into the office like everyone else. Perhaps your priorities need reassessment. Before I could respond, the chief operating officer intervened, suggesting that they table the discussion and continue it at a later date after more data could be collected. The meeting ended shortly after, but the damage was done. That evening, I received an email from Richard with the subject line, "Final decision on remote work arrangements." The message was brief and to the point, effective immediately. All team members were required to work from the office every day. Any exceptions would require his personal approval for medical reasons only supported by extensive documentation. The email concluded with what felt like a direct challenge. Those unwilling to comply with this reasonable expectation should reconsider their future with TechShield solutions. The ultimatum was clear: come into the office every day or find another job. The morning after Richard's ultimatum email, I arrived at the office early, determined to have a rational conversation with him. I had spent the night preparing a detailed presentation showing the objective benefits of our remote work arrangement, particularly for the security team whose responsibilities spanned all 24 hours. I caught Richard just as he was settling into his office with his morning coffee. "Do you have a moment to discuss the remote work policy?" I asked, standing in his doorway with my laptop ready. Richard barely looked up from his computer. "There is nothing to discuss, Marlene. The decision has been made. But I have data showing how our remote monitoring systems have prevented at least 12 major security incidents in the past year alone," I persisted. "Our setup allows us to respond to threats within minutes, regardless of the time of day." Richard finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of annoyance and dismissal. "Marlene, let me be clear. I do not believe that real work happens when people are sitting at home. Period. But the results? I do not pay you for couch sitting," he interrupted sharply, his voice loud enough that I knew people in the nearby cubicles could hear. "I pay you to be here, to be visible, to be part of this team. If that is too difficult for you to understand, perhaps TechShield is not the right fit for you anymore." The conversation had attracted attention. Through the glass walls of Richard's office, I could see several colleagues pretending not to watch our exchange. My face burned with humiliation, but I tried one last time. "Our remote monitoring system is critical to our security operations," I explained, keeping my voice level despite my racing heart. "It allows us to maintain 24-hour surveillance of all client systems from multiple locations. Without it, we create a single point of failure." Richard stood up, his patience clearly exhausted. "Enough excuses, Marlene. The system worked fine before remote work, and it will work fine now. Everyone will be in the office, so someone will always be here to monitor things. But the automated alerts, the redundancy protocols." I said enough. Richard's voice had risen to a near shout. "This constant undermining of my authority ends now. Since you seem unable to accept this decision, let me make it easier for you." He turned to his computer, typing rapidly for a few moments before looking back at me with a cold smile. "I have just revoked your remote access privileges. From now on, you will only be able to access our systems while physically present in this building. Problem solved." I felt the blood drain from my face as the implications sank in. "You did what, Richard? You cannot just cut off my remote access. I maintain critical security protocols that need constant—" "Then you will need to be here to maintain them," he interrupted smugly. 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, like a normal employee." My mind raced through all the security implications. The specialized monitoring system I had built ran partially through my secured home server, which connected to our main network through a complex series of authenticated channels. These channels allowed for instant notification and response to potential threats, regardless of whether I was physically in the office. By revoking my remote access, Richard had effectively cut off a critical part of our security infrastructure. Worse, he had done it without consulting anyone else on the technical team or implementing any alternative monitoring solution. "Richard, you need to restore my access immediately," I said, unable to keep the urgency from my voice. "You have just created a massive blind spot in our security coverage. Several of our most sensitive client systems will now be unmonitored outside of business hours." He waved dismissively. "Always so dramatic. The IT department can reconfigure whatever needs to be changed. Submit a ticket like everyone else." "This is not about tickets or procedures." I was struggling to maintain my composure now. "You have just compromised our entire security infrastructure without understanding the technical implications. Please call the senior IT manager and let me explain what needs to be restored. Instead of responding to my concerns, Richard stood up and walked to his office door, holding it open. I think we are done here, Marlene. Take the rest of the day to decide if you can adapt to our in-office culture. If not, HR can discuss your exit package tomorrow. Stunned and furious, I gathered my things and walked out, acutely aware of the stares from my colleagues. Marcus caught my eye with a sympathetic look while Lisa texted me, "What just happened? Are you okay?" As I drove home, my phone began buzzing with alerts from my now inaccessible monitoring system. Without my remote access, I could not even see what was triggering the warnings, let alone address them. I called Marcus, who was still in the office. "Can you check what is causing these alerts?" I asked him. "I am trying," he replied, sounding stressed, "but I do not have access to your monitoring dashboard. None of us do. It was set up under your credentials for security reasons, remember? That had been a deliberate design choice approved by Janet when she was director. Each of us maintained separate security domains with limited access overlaps to prevent any single point of compromise. Now that design intended to enhance security had become a critical vulnerability because of Richard's impulsive decision. I tried calling Janet, but her assistant informed me she was in meetings all day with potential clients in Chicago. I left an urgent message explaining the situation, then tried the IT department only to be told that any changes to access privileges required director approval. By evening, I was sitting at home watching helplessly as my phone continued to buzz with security alerts that I could no longer address. I documented everything, meticulously sending emails to Richard, the IT department, and Janet, explaining the potential consequences of the current situation. Richard's only response was a terse message. "This can be discussed during business hours tomorrow." That night, I barely slept, knowing that our clients' systems were vulnerable in ways they did not even realize. By cutting me off from the systems I had built and maintained, Richard had not just insulted me or made my job harder, he had potentially exposed millions of dollars worth of sensitive data to risk. And he had done it all because of his outdated belief that work only counted if he could physically see it happening. 2 days after Richard revoked my access, the situation exploded. I was at home updating my resume and considering my options when my phone rang. It was Marcus, and he sounded panicked. "Marlene, we have a major problem. Meridian Global Banking is reporting unusual activity across their entire trading platform. They think they are under attack, and none of us can access your monitoring system to confirm or address it." My heart sank. Meridian was not just any client, they processed over $2 billion in transactions daily. A security breach could be catastrophic, both for them and for TechShield's reputation. "Has anyone contacted Richard?" I asked. "He is in an off-site meeting with potential investors." Not answering his phone, Marcus replied. "Lisa is trying to manually check each system, but without your dashboard, it is like looking for a needle in a haystack. We do not even know where to start." I immediately called Meridian's chief technology officer, who confirmed my worst fears. Their system was showing signs of data extraction. Someone was pulling customer financial information from their servers, and their internal security team could not stop it. "We need TechShield to fix this now," he said, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Our agreement promises 24/7 coverage and 15-minute response time for critical incidents. We are approaching 2 hours now." "I understand completely," I assured him, not wanting to expose our internal chaos. "We are addressing it right now." After hanging up, I called our company's emergency line, which went straight to the chief operating officer, bypassing normal channels. I briefly explained the situation, emphasizing that millions of dollars and our company's reputation were at stake. Within 30 minutes, I received a call from Janet, who had cut her Chicago trip short and returned to headquarters. "Marlene, what the hell is happening?" she asked. "I have Meridian threatening to terminate their contract and pursue legal action, and our technical team telling me they cannot access critical security systems." I explained everything that had transpired with Richard, including his revocation of my remote access and the resulting security gaps. Janet was silent for a moment before speaking. "Get to the office immediately. The board is calling an emergency meeting in 2 hours." When I arrived at TechShield headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. The executive floor was buzzing with activity, and I was immediately ushered into the main boardroom. Already seated were the company's top executives, including the CEO, the chief financial officer, and Janet. Richard was sitting at one end of the table looking defensive. Also present was someone I did not recognize, a stern-looking woman in a sharp suit who was introduced as Patricia Winters from Internal Audit. Meridian's chief technology officer and chief information security officer had joined via video conference, their expressions grim. The CEO opened the meeting without preamble. We have a serious situation on our hands. Meridian has experienced a security breach that has potentially exposed customer data. They are estimating damages in the millions, and they are holding us responsible under the terms of our service agreement. I need to understand exactly what happened and why we failed to prevent it. All eyes turned to Richard, who cleared his throat nervously. There appears to have been a technical oversight in our monitoring systems. I assure you, we are addressing it as we speak. Technical oversight, Meridian CISO interrupted incredulously. Your systems completely missed a coordinated attack that continued for nearly 4 hours before our internal team managed to contain it. This goes well beyond an oversight. Janet spoke up. I believe Marlene can provide some clarity on what happened with our monitoring systems. As concisely as possible, I explained how our security monitoring infrastructure worked, how my remote access was a critical component of that system, and how Richard's decision to revoke that access had created vulnerable blind spots in our coverage. To be clear, I concluded the attack began during non-business hours, when no one was in the office to monitor the systems, and the alerts were triggered on a dashboard that only I could access that was revoked without any alternative being put in place. Richard's face had turned progressively redder as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned forward aggressively. This is absurd. Marlene is trying to deflect from her own failure to properly document her systems. If her monitoring setup was so critical, it should have been accessible to the entire team. It was designed that way intentionally, I countered. The segregation of access was a security feature approved by leadership, documented in our security protocols and explained in quarterly security reviews that you attended, Richard. The internal auditor, Patricia, who had been taking notes throughout the exchange, now spoke up. I have been reviewing the system logs and access records since this incident was reported. What I am seeing is deeply concerning. She turned her laptop around to show a timeline displayed on the screen. This chart shows when various security monitoring systems went offline. As you can see, exactly 17 minutes after Mr. Walker revoked Miss Anderson's credentials, our first line of defense against precisely this type of intrusion became non-operational. The CEO's expression darkened, and no backup system was activated. There was no backup system because no proper change management procedure was followed, Patricia explained clinically. The access was simply cut off without any impact analysis or transition plan. Richard tried to interject, but Patricia continued her tone, professional but unyielding. If I may, I would like to demonstrate something for the board. She connected her laptop to the room's main display and launched a simulation program. This is a real-time model of what happens when our monitoring systems go offline. The clock represents estimated financial impact based on our service-level agreements with clients. As the simulation ran, a counter appeared on screen rapidly, increasing 117,000 per hour. This figure represents the contractual penalties, estimated data recovery costs, and potential liability exposure for each hour that critical systems remain unmonitored based on our current client portfolio, Patricia explained. It does not include long-term reputational damage or potential client loss. The room fell silent as everyone watched the number climb higher. After just a few minutes of the simulation, the total had reached over $500,000. Richard, visibly shaken, finally broke the silence. Turn it off and fix the systems immediately, he demanded, looking at me. Patricia paused the simulation and looked at him evenly. She cannot. You revoked her access. The chairman of the board, who had been silently observing until now, slowly shook his head. She cannot. You revoked her access. He repeated, his voice quiet but cutting. That single sentence perfectly encapsulates the catastrophic failure of leadership we are witnessing here. Richard's face drained of color as the chairman continued. You made a unilateral decision without understanding its technical implications, without consulting subject matter experts, without following change management procedures, and without implementing any contingency plan. And now one of our most valuable clients has suffered a breach that could potentially cost millions. The CEO turned to me. Marlene, what do we need to do to restore proper security monitoring immediately? My access needs to be reinstated right away, I replied. Then I can assess the extent of the damage, restore the monitoring systems, and begin implementing additional safeguards to prevent further breaches. Make it happen, the CEO said to the IT director, who had been called into the meeting. Give her whatever resources she needs. As the meeting concluded, the chairman addressed Richard directly. Mr. Walker, please remain behind. The rest of you, thank you for your time. As I left the boardroom with Janet, she whispered, I owe you an apology, Marlene. I should have taken your concerns more seriously. Let us just focus on fixing this mess first, I replied, already mentally preparing for the long night ahead. With my access restored, I immediately began the process of bringing our security systems back online and assessing the extent of the damage at Meridian. The breach had been significant but not catastrophic. The attackers had accessed customer information, but had not yet exfiltrated the most sensitive financial data when Meridian's internal team managed to contain the attack. I worked for 36 hours straight, pausing only for brief naps at my desk. Lisa and Marcus joined me, and together we not only restored the compromised systems but implemented additional layers of security that would prevent similar attacks in the future. By the time we finished, Meridian's systems were more secure than they had ever been. Their CISO personally called to thank us for the rapid response and innovative solutions we had implemented post-breach. While they were still unhappy about the initial failure, our recovery efforts had gone a long way toward rebuilding their trust. 1 week after the incident, a company-wide meeting was called to discuss what had happened and the changes being implemented as a result. The CEO opened the meeting with a direct address. Last week, TechShield experienced a significant failure in our security protocols that resulted in a client breach. I want to be transparent about what happened and what we are doing to ensure it never happens again. He proceeded to outline the sequence of events, not naming Richard directly, but making it clear that the breach had resulted from poor management decisions rather than technical failures. He then turned to me. Marlene Anderson and her team worked tirelessly to not only address the immediate crisis but to strengthen our overall security posture. Their dedication exemplifies the values that TechShield was built upon. The CEO then made a series of announcements that sent a clear message throughout the organization. Richard had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. In the interim, Janet would return to her previous role as director of our department while continuing her vice president duties. Most significantly for me, the CEO announced the formation of a new cybersecurity excellence team that would report directly to the executive level, bypassing middle management entirely. I was named as the leader of this team with authority to implement best practices across the organization and autonomy to structure our work in whatever way maximized effectiveness, including remote work arrangements. The incident last week taught us a valuable lesson, the CEO concluded. We must trust our experts and value results over rigid adherence to traditional work models. Moving forward, TechShield will embrace flexible work arrangements wherever they enhance our ability to serve clients and protect their data. After the meeting, Janet pulled me aside for a private conversation. I want to personally apologize for not backing you up against Richard, she said. I got caught up in executive politics and forgot what made our team successful in the first place. We all make mistakes, I replied. What matters is how we learn from them. Janet smiled. The board has asked me to work directly with you on restructuring our security operations. They were impressed with how you handled the crisis, and they want to ensure you have everything you need to build something even better. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with Janet and the executive team to completely overhaul our security infrastructure. We implemented a distributed monitoring system with multiple redundancies, ensuring that no single point of failure could compromise our clients' security again. More importantly, we established clear protocols that prevented any individual manager from making unilateral changes to critical systems without proper review and transition planning. I also seized the opportunity to build a more diverse and inclusive team. I recruited security specialists from various backgrounds, including parents who needed flexible schedules, people with disabilities, who worked best from home, and international experts who could provide coverage across different time zones. Our new team structure was based entirely on skills, results, and availability, not physical presence in an office. The internal investigation into the breach was completed a month later, and its findings were damning for Richard. Not only had he violated company protocols by revoking access without proper procedures, but the investigation also uncovered a pattern of discriminatory behavior toward remote workers and a concerning tendency to dismiss technical expertise in favor of his personal preferences. The final nail in the coffin came when the financial impact assessment was completed. Between contractual penalties, emergency response costs, additional security measures, and compensation to affected Meridian customers, Richard's decision had cost TechShield just over $2 million. And that did not include the incalculable costs to our reputation and the additional oversight requirements now imposed by nervous clients. Richard was officially terminated, with the company pursuing legal options to recover some of the financial damages through his executive liability insurance. His replacement, a forward-thinking leader with experience in distributed teams, made a point of personally apologizing to me for the treatment I had endured. Within 3 months of the incident, our newly structured security operations were showing impressive results. Our response time to potential threats had decreased by 40%. We had prevented 3 major attacks on client systems before they even began, and team satisfaction scores were at an all-time high. Perhaps most satisfying was the day I received an email from a competing security firm. They had hired Richard after his termination from TechShield, apparently unaware of the full circumstances of his departure. The email was a security industry newsletter, announcing his resignation after just 2 months, following irreconcilable differences regarding operational methodologies. Translation: he had tried to pull the same rigid, controlling management style, and had been shown the door even faster this time. While I took no pleasure in anyone's career struggles, there was a certain poetic justice in knowing that Richard's inability to adapt to modern work realities had ultimately limited his own opportunities, not mine. 6 months after the Meridian incident, I found myself sitting in what had once been Richard's office, now mine, as the newly appointed Chief Information Security Officer, CISO of TechShield Solutions. The promotion had come as a surprise, announced during a board meeting where I had been presenting our quarterly security results. "Your handling of the crisis demonstrated not just technical expertise but the leadership qualities we need in our executive team," the chairman had said. "You protected our clients when systems failed. You rebuilt our security infrastructure to be stronger than ever. And perhaps most importantly, you created a team culture based on results, rather than appearances." Looking around at my new office, I felt a sense of vindication but also responsibility. The journey from being dismissed as a couch sitter to becoming an executive had taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself and my expertise, even when those in positions of authority tried to diminish my contributions. The emotional journey had not been easy. After Richard's public humiliation and the subsequent crisis, I had struggled with self-doubt, despite my technical confidence. Had I somehow invited his disdain? Could I have communicated more effectively? Should I have fought harder earlier in the process? Therapy helped me recognize that Richard's behavior reflected his limitations, not mine. His inability to value work he could not physically observe spoke to his insecurity as a leader, not any deficiency in my performance. Once I internalized this truth, I was able to rebuild my professional confidence and embrace my new leadership role without the shadow of those painful experiences. With Janet's mentorship and the board's support, I had transformed our security operations into a model of modern, flexible work. Our team now included 30 security specialists across 4 countries, working in a carefully coordinated system that provided 24-hour coverage without burning anyone out. Some worked primarily from offices, others from home, and many used a hybrid approach based on their specific job functions and personal circumstances. The results spoke for themselves. Our client retention rate had reached 98%, and we had added 15 major new clients specifically because of our enhanced security capabilities. The distributed nature of our team had become a selling point rather than a liability, as we could demonstrate how our round-the-clock geographically dispersed monitoring provided superior protection against emerging threats. I had also developed a training program that had become mandatory for all managers at TechShield, focused on evaluating performance based on outcomes rather than arbitrary metrics like time spent in an office. The program, titled Beyond Presenteeism: Building High-Performance Teams in the Digital Age, directly challenged the outdated management philosophies that Richard had embodied. My relationship with the executive team had evolved from adversarial to collaborative. Where once I had felt the need to constantly justify my work arrangements, I now had a seat at the table where company policies were made. My perspective as someone who had experienced both the benefits of flexible work and the consequences of rigid management was valued in strategic discussions about company culture and talent retention. One particularly satisfying moment came when a former colleague who had left during Richard's tenure reached out to inquire about returning to TechShield. "I have been following the changes you have implemented," she wrote. "It seems like TechShield has become the kind of place where professionals are truly respected for their contributions, not just their office attendance." Perhaps the most unexpected development was when I was invited to deliver a keynote address at the annual Cybersecurity Leadership Conference. My topic, Securing the Future: How Flexible Work Models Enhance Organizational Resilience, drew on my experiences to make the case that companies clinging to outdated work models were not just limiting their talent pool, but potentially creating security vulnerabilities through inflexible systems. As I prepared for the conference, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, I realized that what had initially felt like a personal affront had ultimately catalyzed positive change throughout our organization. Richard's dismissive attitude and the crisis it precipitated had forced TechShield to confront outdated assumptions about work and value, ultimately making us stronger and more resilient. The lesson was clear. True professional value comes not from where you work, but from the results you deliver and the problems you solve. In the digital age, clinging to industrial-era concepts of presenteeism does not just create unnecessary limitations, it can actively harm organizations by devaluing the contributions of talented individuals who work differently. I now understood that standing up for myself had not just been about defending my personal work arrangement, it had been about advocating for a more effective, inclusive approach to work itself. By refusing to accept Richard's narrow definition of productivity, I had helped create space for a more diverse range of talented professionals to contribute their best work in ways that suited their unique circumstances. The journey had changed me as well. Where once I might have quietly accommodated unreasonable demands to avoid conflict, I had learned to confidently assert my expertise and stand firm when I knew I was right. The experience had transformed me from a technical specialist into a leader who could not only solve complex security challenges, but also navigate organizational politics and drive cultural change. As I look toward the future, I remain grateful for the crisis that ultimately created opportunity. Had Richard not pushed me to the breaking point, I might never have discovered my capacity for leadership or had the chance to reshape our organization's approach to work. Sometimes the greatest growth comes from our most difficult challenges, and the people who try to diminish us inadvertently reveal our true strength. If there is one thing I hope others take from my story, it is this: never let someone else's limited perspective define your value or potential. Whether you work from an office, your home, or anywhere in between, what matters is the unique expertise and perspective you bring to the table. True professionals are defined not by their physical presence, but by their impact, integrity, and results. So I ask you, are you standing in your power and expertise, or are you shrinking to fit someone else's narrow definition of what valuable work looks like? Share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated you? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories. Remember to like this video. If it resonated with you, subscribe for more workplace insights and share with anyone who might need a reminder of their own worth in the professional world. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, your value is not determined by where you sit, but by what you contribute.